So today you are here. Thank you for joining us, for participating to learn about AI evaluations and the establishment of a potential international framework. We are joined by three experts in the field. So thank you for being here. Chloé Touzet for SaferAI, who is the head of policy. Agnès Delaborde, who is the head of Department of AI Evaluation and Cybersecurity at the LNI, which is the National Laboratory for Metrology and Testing. And Quentin Feuillade Montixi, who is the co-founder and CTO at PRISM Eval. And so before we begin, I will give the floor to Charles to tell you a little bit more about the CeSIA, about our vision. And then we will proceed with the panel discussion. Please note that you can write your questions in the chat throughout the discussion because we will have a Q&A session after. So without further ado, Charles, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Ines. Welcome, everyone. Very happy to be here. So let me start by saying some brief background. And let me start first with a question. Are you ready today to properly evaluate the standards for the AI systems we're building? Just a few years ago, AI systems were designed for specific tasks, playing chess, recognizing images, translating text. Today, we have general purpose systems with capabilities that sometimes surprise even the developers. This shift has exposed the limitation of our traditional evaluation methods. Static benchmarks, essentially standardized states for AI, can't always capture how these systems actually behave in the real world. In turn, there's a growing gap between what we need to evaluate and what we can actually evaluate. Our ability to assess AI thoroughly isn't keeping pace with the speed of development. This is what some call the evaluation gap. Think about it. Governments are drafting regulations, companies are making commitments about AI safety, and everyone is relying heavily on evaluations to make critical decisions. The AI Act relies on evaluations, but we're still figuring out exactly what evaluation tools and methodologies are. What makes this particularly challenging is that as AI systems become more capable, we need both more evaluations and more complex ones. And when these systems are deployed in critical areas, we can't afford to get it wrong. This matters because we're not just talking about academic exercises. These evaluations may soon underpin million-dollar decisions about AI deployment. They'll determine whether systems can be released to the public or need additional safeguards. And right now, we're not where we need to be. This evaluation gap points to an opportunity and a need for common development of standards. When every organization is struggling individually to develop evaluation methods, with duplicating efforts and potentially missing important risks, common standards could help spread best practices and ensure we're not overlooking critical areas in our assessments. But this raises a whole range of questions we need to address. How do we know if an evaluation is actually measuring what it claims to measure? How do we ensure results are reliable and can be replicated? And perhaps most importantly, how do we make sure these evaluations remain relevant as AI systems become more powerful? It's at this point that international standards become crucial. They can provide the foundation for an ecosystem to flourish. They can help ensure that evaluations done in one part of the world are recognized and trusted in another. And they can help us avoid a fragmented landscape where different regions have different standards for what constitutes a thorough evaluation. These are precisely the challenges and opportunities we'll explore today with our distinguished panel. And thanks again for being here. Ines, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. So we see that the stakes are high, and I'm glad that we'll be able to dig deeper into these topics. But before we start, maybe so that our participants get to know a little bit more about you, our speakers, can you briefly introduce yourselves and how the work that you do in the field of AI evaluation contributes to advanced AI safety? And maybe, Agnès, you can start.
Yes, thank you, Ines. So I am Agnès Delaborde. I work with the LNI, the National Laboratory for Metrology and Testing. In our context, we are under the supervision of the Ministry for Industry, the French ministry, naturally. And we are exclusively dedicated to doing tests and certification on all the products of industry. In the context of my department, naturally, the product in question is AI. So I will come back to it. It's AI at large in whatever the domains, etc. And we also have I was about to say a strong expertise in metrology, but well, as you could guess from the name of the laboratory, indeed, we've got strong activities in metrology, and I think I will talk about it a bit later. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Quentin.
Hi, I'm Quentin. So I'm the CTO at PRISM Eval. We are a company focused on evaluating and interpreting models by the behavioral aspect. So we are trying to have another approach to interpretability, which is to study that behavior in practice and trying to understand why they behave as they does. And so currently we're focusing on behavioral elicitation. So trying to understand how easy it is to elicit behavior from specific models and trying to understand, to probe the resistance of those models to adversarial prompting attack using a dynamic approach. So what we do differently from the other evaluation is that we have developed a system that's actually optimized against the LLM that they evaluate. Instead of doing a random test, we actually have a system that tries to break the model, and then we evaluate the robustness of the system by looking at how long the system have resisted to optimization against the system. And yeah, I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Yes, we'll dig deeper into the products you're developing and the questions. Thank you, Quentin. And now, Chloé, so our final speaker, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do at SaferAI?
Sure, thanks, and thanks very much for having me. So I'm Chloé Touzet, I'm the head of policy at SaferAI. We're a non-profit, we're based in Paris, and we focused on advancing AI risk management. So to your question, I would say our work spans perhaps beyond AI evaluation itself, where what we aim to do is incentivize the responsible AI risk management practice. And I guess AI model evaluation is a part of it. And we do that through research-based policy recommendations and the development of tools, innovative risk assessment tools. So maybe to give you a bit more concrete example, we've been working on a project which is developing a risk management framework for AI developers. And our main hunch in doing this is to try and leverage lessons from other safety critical industries. So our starting point is to say, yes, AI technology is very often a black box, in some regards at least, but AI risk management doesn't necessarily have to be. There are, in fact, many protocols, many processes that are used routinely in industries like aviation, nuclear, cybersecurity, even the financial industry. And those tend to be technology agnostic, and they can be adapted to AI. So ultimately, we developed this framework, and ultimately it is a set of steps with clear procedures to allow balancing innovation in AI with the need to avoid harms. And we do believe that if it was adopted widely by developers, it could considerably improve the safety of advanced AI systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, we'll also delve deeper into how you think it can incentivize industry. So before we go into more precise questions that I will ask each one of you respectively to what you do, I will give the floor very briefly to Charbel, who will also present what the CeSIA does, because we also play a role in this ecosystem, and maybe give some of additional stakes. So Charbel, if you...
Yes, thank you, Ines. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So yeah, I'm delighted to open this roundtable on a very critical topic: how to develop international standards to evaluate AI systems that are becoming more powerful and complex by the day. So in a few weeks, France will host the AI Action Summit following the summits in Bletchley Park and Seoul. And this momentum reflects a growing recognition that AI is not just a technological challenge, but it's a global governance challenge. So at CeSIA, we work precisely at the intersection of these technical and governance challenges. Our experience with, for example, the BELS benchmark for the evaluation of AI safeguard systems are contributing to the European Code of Practice has shown us one thing. Current evaluation methods are not up to the challenges posed by modern AI systems. And there is a lot of uncertainty on the standards we need. So let me give you a concrete example. For example, in BELS, we've demonstrated that all safeguard systems for LLMs fails on at least one type of attack, with detection rates of the attack sometimes falling below 35%. So this is a major concern when these systems are being deployed in critical domains. The good news is that international momentum is building. The creation of the AI safety institutes in different countries, the work of the European AI Act, and the emergence of an evaluation ecosystem, all of this creates a unique opportunity to establish common evaluation standards. That's why I'm particularly pleased that CeSIA organized today's roundtable and to build on this momentum. I now hand over to Charles.
Thank you, Charbel. So maybe we can start with some more specific questions. You mentioned the momentum. You mentioned different initiatives in the ecosystem, and I wanted maybe first to ask Quentin. Because maybe Charbel, you did not mention in the context, but that we have been hearing a lot about is concerns over how fast the technology is being developed and deployed, and worries that evaluation standards would not be able to keep up and be future-proof. So there are challenges, but can you tell us a little bit more, Quentin, again, how PRISM Eval tackles this issue and the methods that you develop?
So I think like for the issue with systemic being like more and more advanced, the main issue is like how many people you have and like evaluating the system, because so I'm a big believer in the what I call field study. So I think it's very important to be driven by what you observe in the behavior of the model. So interacting a lot with a lot of intuition, like you start with hypothesis and you run a lot of experiments directly with the model to get a lot of information. So for example, like sycophancy, like when you look at what Apollo is doing, they are currently only doing like behavioral stuff. So or like what they are showcasing the most is an example of behavior of the system being deceptive. And so when you look at what the people are doing is mainly like they found ways to prompt the model to behave in some specific way, and then they showcase what they saw in those specific conditions. And I think that's the bigger the model, the more complex the behavior they can display will be. And so I think it's very important to have a lot of people interacting with those models with a lot of different ideas and a hypothesis, and just test them and then spin off research from it. So like when they discover something that's interesting, take them on the lab and actually like try to decompose what's happening in the field and trying to understand the phenomenon they observe. So I think that's the main way I think we should handle this like growing complexity is having more people interacting with model and like growing the number of people in the field. And what we are doing at PRISM right now is that we are trying to develop tools to automatize a part of this process of like discovery of taking the intuitions and testing them in the lab. So the tool we've been building to evaluate the robustness of system is called BET, Behavior Elicitation Tool. So it's basically something that's going to you're going to give hypothesis to the system, basically to BET. So like we have a lot of hypotheses, and then BET is going to optimize to try to find the combination, or like the what we call primitive. Basically, it's like you have small techniques. So for example, like writing in base64, or like asking the model to give you some specific information. Like this is like small decomposable techniques that you can combine. And so what we do is we use BET to map basically what we call like the behavioral landscape. Like this is ideally what we want to do at the end. Is like getting an idea of how the behavior works on some specific hypothesis. And then from this, trying to derive information. So for now, we are only focusing on the refusal mechanism. So why does model refuses some specific instruction? This is the landscape we are currently mapping, but we see that it could be extended to whatever kind of behavior. So for now, we're just focusing on that, but later trying to extend to any other type of behaviors. And truly use BET as a research tool and as a research lab, basically, instead of just an evaluation metric. And so for I don't know if it's here. Yeah, so this is what we're doing mainly. I'm going to talk later more.
Thank you. So that's very interesting because you have you have kind of a framework that automates testing, but how do you ensure that it remains consistent and reliable, and particularly with emerging capabilities? And what are the challenges that maybe you encountered in making it reproducible?
Yeah. Okay. I was expecting this question. This is why I stopped my answer previously. Okay. So maybe I should explain a little bit how this works before. So to explain why we think it's not a real issue with what we're doing. So currently what we do is we run a different optimization run. So there is a lot of combination. The landscape is like huge. There's like billions of possible prompts that you can create from using bets. So what we do is we do a run of optimization. We map out we've explored the part of the like behavior landscape, and so we have some information on like this prompt works, this prompt doesn't work, this technique works, this technique doesn't work, and so we have this kind of like a partial mapping of the like refusal on one step, and then what we do is we explore this landscape and we say if I am an agent, a random agent like an ant, for example, we do actually like the ant colony optimization algorithm. We like try if I was an agent going in this landscape, how long will it take me to stumble upon a prompt that break the model? So like trying to navigate this landscape, and so to verify if our prompt, if our like metric is stable and like reproducible, what we do is we aggregate different runs. So what we do is we map the landscape once, we map the landscape a second time, a third time, a fourth time with like different randomization. So it's like each time we search the landscape, it's a new exploration. So what we do is we explore some amount of time, and then we look at when I send random ants in this landscape, do I have similar metrics? So like I look at if the different parcours of the landscape are the same. And so there's multiple things we're doing. We're currently validating this metric because we've been working on this. We're planning to finish this metric in like 1 or 2 weeks. So we are currently validating whether aggregating different graphs change the time you take to find a prompt that breaks. And so what we're saying right now is that the more you aggregate different optimization, the more you converge toward a stable time to find the prompt that breaks. And so yeah, how we do it is basically we aggregate different exploration, and we see that at some point, like I think right now it's around 2 or 3 aggregation, we have a stable. So like it's not useful to continue exploiting because it's going to just stay the same average when you explore the landscape. So we just sufficiently map the landscape of the behavior, and then when it's enough, we use this to generate our metric, basically. And we are currently running a lot of tests with like 100 of runs and comparing different optimization.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you for explaining. I'm sure we'll have some questions about this method.
We would have been a bit clearer with a slide, but yeah.
It's all good. Thank you. Now maybe we can move to Agnès because I think you also have. The LNE has been recognized for its long-standing expertise on building evaluation methods and carrying them out. What are the challenges that you've encountered, maybe that are specific to AI systems, when you created these evaluation methods?
The main challenge that we faced over time, and perhaps it's above all linked to our resources, is the fact that, as I mentioned at the beginning in my introduction, is the fact that AI is present in so many domains. For quite a long time, we were quite alone on the scene of evaluation. I mean, as people were fully dedicated to evaluation. And we felt like we had to cover so many different types of applications and types of algorithm and different contexts of use that may vary across I don't know, special applications and agriculture and legal technologies, etc. So we were a bit overwhelmed with the different potential scenes that we had to tackle. But well, we took this challenge anyway because we had no other choice. What we observed after a certain time is that, in fact, it's not so much a challenge, this diversity of application, because, in fact, well, I would say, and no surprise with that, an AI system is always the same, and the potential flaws of an AI system and mistakes, etc., they remain quite consistent. So we used it rather as a strength. And currently, what we provide to the rest of the community is, well, we establish links. For example, in the spatial domain, well, aeronautics domain, they've made big progress, and in the autonomous vehicle domain as well, they made big progress in terms of defining what is safety in this domain, what may be the indicators, etc. So we're taking this information and, for example, sharing it with, I mentioned just before, the legal technologies domain. So this is our main, this is how we overcome this initial challenge. In fact, in the end, it's a strength because it means that the different communities can share their good practice. Still on the same domain, the same idea of covering several domains. What I observed as well, I learned a lot from the machinery domain. So the industrial domain dealing with the robotics, where they have their own approach of dealing with safety that is quite rational and feasible and in link with what industry can do. So it learned a way of tackling the topic of risks, but I think that we are going to go a little bit deeper on this aspect just after that. One other challenge that we face, and we still face it, and when I say we, it's not only LNE, it's the rest of the community, is that on one side, we've got softwares, when we talk about LLMs, etc. So let's talk about ChatGPT, where you can speak and it doesn't have an impact. But when we're talking of embedded AI, or in the context of ChatGPT, etc., generative AI and LLMs, agentic AI, the problem is that we've got a system that is not only a software, it can affect the rest of the world. Currently, we're talking a lot of agentic AI, like something big, something new, but just to remember that we have the same problem in robotics and it has been tackled for years. I'm not saying that we found answers on this topic, but I think it remains the same challenge. The fact that this software may have an impact on the physical, quite physical world. So I think it's part of the challenges that needs to be tackled. And as I said, I think that crossing the expertise and the knowledge and the feedback from different communities is really worthwhile, and we should encourage it at any cost. In fact, not creating again one standard per domain. It's a bit useless, but unfortunately, this is what the community tends to do because it's so natural. People in robotics, they are not so used to talking with people in legal, for example, software. So this is where I think that, well, people around the table here, PRISM, Eval, SaferAI, and the CeSIA as well, I know that we are part of this dynamic of ensuring that we tie the link between the communities.
Yeah, thank you very much. You kind of answered the question I was going to ask next, which is how you think your approach can inform the development of evaluation standards. And I guess there's a real emphasis on information sharing between different communities. I also talked about, I mean, it joins what Charles was saying earlier about the AI applied to critical infrastructure and how that can have an impact in the physical world. But maybe if you can elaborate on it a little bit more, how do you think your approach, and I asked the same question to Quentin after you, Agnès, how do you think that this approach can inform the development of evaluation standards?
As I said earlier, for years we felt a bit alone on the scene of evaluation. Well, I'm not saying that we were alone, but we felt a bit alone in comparison to now. For years, we always felt the need to remind everyone that no, evaluation is really important, and it should be done more than only simple tests done in laboratory conditions, etc. So for years we felt the need to remind it every time. Now, in the past 2 or 3 years, well, in my opinion, when the AI Act, when we start talking of AI Act, I think that something changed, and now everyone is talking of evaluation. So all of a sudden, the scene is quite crowded. So I would say that, and crowded with really relevant people. So I would say that here we should put forward what are the specific strengths of LNE. I mentioned the metrology aspect. Well, we're part of the Metrology international network with I never remember, but it's something like perhaps 50 countries. I'm not sure of the number, so sorry for that, but well, quite a lot of countries that are part of the network. So I think that first of all, we should normally be able to provide some tracks to follow to enhance the testing methods. And it can apply to, well, the metrology approach. It helps to design indicators and metrics, etc. But not only, it also helps inform the processes around, well, how you do an evaluation. Because in the context of metrology, we're talking about measurement and legal metrology. So, high level of guarantees in the proofs. So I think that LNE may be a key in that, since, well, we should and we must, in fact, ensure, and the Act write it in an article, we must make sure at some point that metrology is involved. So I think that one thing of importance there, it's not anyone can improvise themselves experts in metrology. There are already there is a network of in metrology. So for all the members of the metrology network, and NIST in US are part of this network as well, we must ensure that the communities are linked. So I'm still talking of linking communities. The other aspects that we have to take into account, I mentioned that we're under the supervision of the Ministry of Industry, and in our daily lives, we are always connected to industrial customers. In fact, our customers, there are companies. In this regard, on a day-to-day basis, our activities there is that we are testing their softwares as a independent third party, but we are also providing guidelines and recommendations and explanation as well about the regulatory compliance aspects. So I think that this is one approach that perhaps misses in some discussions around the evaluation of AI, where in some communities we're talking of top-level considerations and science research as well. And sometimes we miss the voice of industry. What can be audited, what is industry? Well, they want to put a product on the market. They don't want to spend a whole year doing evaluation. the big players can do that naturally. They've got enough money to be even better than us in evaluating the systems and doing research. But we must consider that there are smaller players that really need to ensure that at some point someone represent their voices in the discussions. So yes, okay, let's talk about big risks, etc., and huge evaluation campaigns, etc. But yes, but we should do as well something realistic that the companies are able to seize. So in these two key elements, I think that LNE can play a strong role in metrology and in the representation of industry.
Thank you very much, Agnès. Yes, I mean, the industry is going to be applying all the standards, so of course their involvement is key. And maybe I will address the same question to Quentin very quickly about the way that PRISM Eval's approach can inform development of evaluation standards, maybe from a more practical and operational perspective.
I think I quite like what Agnès is saying about like also remembering that what we're doing is to help industrial deploy their model and like actually bring values to the ecosystem. So we're kind of close to this. We want to bring meaningful metrics that are useful for those industrials. So for example, like when you run like a static benchmark on your model and you get like a 5 out of 200 percentage of robustness, which doesn't mean really anything. It's not really useful for an industrial to like be able to actually develop their system. And so we really want to also like be here to help them really understand the robustness of their system. So like we give them information on how long it takes to break their model, and they can say like, okay, we have this target. We want our system to last at least I don't know, 5 hours to someone which is experimented at prompt engineering. And so what they do is they can iterate on the system quickly. So compare different system prompt, compare different filter, compare different model really quickly, and actually use this evaluation not just for like being certified, but also for doing decisions that are actually useful for developing their systems. So I think we're on this side also very close to what Agnès is doing at LNE, and the other side that I'm more like more my side, what I really want to push on this information of developments of international evaluation standards is like remind people that what we're interacting with is complex system. It's not a system. It's not a car that you can like decompose in some specific pieces and just evaluate each pieces independently. It's a complex system that behaves in complex ways that we still don't really understand. And so like when we do evaluation, we should remember this and remember that static is not the way. Like doing static evaluation is going to be missing some important points because you're only focusing on some specific aspects, and you need to remember that when you do an evaluation, it should be holistic because we are evaluating a complex system. So I think this is something where we're going to keep pushing, which is like when you do evaluation, remember it's a complex system. It's not a car. Yeah, but still, I think it's possible to do metrics. It's possible to do standards, and I really join what Ellen is doing. I think it's important to have robust metrology frameworks, but I think it's still possible to do it while remembering that it's a complex system. Yeah.
Yes, so it's I mean it's all the complexity, right? To associate the comprehensiveness of an evaluation and make it operational while at the same time adding value to the industry and maintaining the safety of AI systems. Thank you very much for your insights. Now moving on to Chloé. So maybe we'll bring a bit of a different angle to this conversation. SaferAI has been working on establishing a quantified risk assessment framework for AI systems. You also mentioned the initial rating they did of risk management practices for leading AI companies. Can you tell us a little bit about how this work can contribute to incentivize the industry leaders? So I understood this was a goal of SaferAI. Now, concretely, how do you envision this can happen? We talked about the necessity right now of involving industry actors a bit more. How can SaferAI's work really operationally get industry actors to care?
Thanks for the question and for mentioning the two projects, because I think they're two different examples of how we're trying to contribute. So let's start with the ratings first. In my introduction, I mentioned the work we're doing on risk management framework. So as I said, we studied what was done in other safety critical industries and came up with this framework, which very succinctly can be described in 4 pillars. The first one is risk identification, then risk evaluation and analysis, then risk treatment or mitigation if you prefer, and finally we have a pillar on risk governance. And so on the basis of this framework, we've developed a rating scale, if you want, which is designed to assess the maturity of AI developers' existing risk management practices. And I'm saying maturity, it's important because we do understand we are at the beginning of industry also developing those practices. And so we looked at what was done in other industries to arrive at a satisfactory level of safety practices. And so we designed a framework that is what would be enough, what would be sufficient to guarantee that AI development is done safely. And then, yeah, we use this to kind of look at what's done, what's out there, and see where we are. And the logic that we followed here was very much inspired by what has proven to be quite a successful strategy for other risks to society. So if you take climate change risk, for example, which is namely increasing transparency and accountability through rating companies' practices. So what we aim to do this is to raise public awareness of the issue and then to incentivize companies to adopt adequate policies, notably so that they can attract customers and attract capital from investors as well. And I want to say, I do think this is different from kind of name and shame, if you want, because we are suggesting a solution, right? So like to kind of echo what was done before me, like indeed the aim is to support developers and regulators here. The idea is to propose a tool that developers can adopt to improve their risk management practice. And ultimately, we want them to go further in developing more comprehensive and transparent AI risk management procedures, which will lead to just safety across the board, improved safety. And I do think we're in a context where, as of yet, we don't have many detailed widespread regulation on what it is that companies should do. You know, we want them to do better, but we don't have much out there on what they should do, how they should do it. We all know there are some proto-risk management frameworks produced by developers themselves. So, you know, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, and OpenAI have put out some documents. And our ratings are really meant to be supportive towards this. We think for AI developers, they can help, the work can help establish kind of clear benchmarks for industry practices. It can help them identify areas where they need to improve. So it's kind of helpful in the sense of drafting a roadmap. For regulators, we think it's helpful to shed light on blind spots in current industry practices to kind of guide regulatory priorities, perhaps. And then for investors and customers as well, we think providing transparency into companies' risk management maturity is important to enable informed decision-making, right? One important thing is we are committed to update those ratings as developers update their risk management policies. So that's another way to kind of incentivize them. The rating is also developed to be compatible with some existing industry standards, with the EU AI Act, with, you know, initiatives like the G7 Hiroshima process. And importantly, it builds upon what industry is already doing, right? We're not ignoring what they have put out there, we're building upon it. And we very purposefully took into account not only what they've published as their responsible scaling policy in the case of Anthropic, for example, but also what they publish in terms of research paper. Really, we took into account the research directions that they engage in to also give credit to industry researchers who are producing very useful work. But very often this work doesn't necessarily make its way into risk management policies. So within companies, it tends to be different people doing the safety research and drafting the risk management policies. And I guess we also saw work as a push to encourage industry leaders to incorporate their own good research in their practice, basically. And on the ratings, I just want to say finally that beyond another reason to do them is that kind of when it comes to AI, public accountability, we believe is important, not just as a lever to promote safety, but also for kind of fundamental democratic reasons, if that makes sense. It is a very transformative technology, and so there should be public oversight over it. And so there should be a push for transparency, right? And this is why the ratings that we publish are based on publicly available information, right? Following that logic of accountability and transparency. So that's one example of the type of work that we do. And then another one, you mentioned our work on quantitative risk assessment. So the risk management framework we designed, as I explained, this is a description of kind of practices that would be enough to uphold the safe development of AI. And we need to be very honest, it contains building blocks that currently are underdeveloped. So for example, in our building block on, in our pillar, if you want, on risk evaluation, one of the building block is being able to quantify risks. So, and the truth is, it's a key part of risk evaluation and analysis. The truth is that the current approaches to quantifying risk are very preliminary at best. Again, there are things that we can learn from other industries though. And so this particular research project really aims to fill in this gap and to kind of improve the AI risk management tooling at the disposal of industry leaders. So one way is through accountability, incentivize them to move forward. Another way is providing the tools. So I think, to me, it does resonate with what my co-panelists have said about kind of working with industry, I believe.
Yes, completely. Thank you so much for telling us about SaferAI's work on these aspects. And yes, coming from the cybersecurity industry, this is, especially on the quantification of risks, so this is a big topic. So it's very interesting. But I have a question to ask you about this, because you mentioned the vision, that is very anchored in democratic values and having this transparency and encouraging the maturity of the whole ecosystem. What are the challenges that you faced with this work? Because it requires a lot of collaboration also, I imagine.
It does, absolutely. One of the big challenges definitely that you need to coordinate between different types of actors and kind of different jurisdictions. But I would say, that challenge is more about adopting a common framework. So not necessarily in our day-to-day work at SaferAI, but in getting this framework to be widely adopted. Coordination is a big thing for sure. Ensuring this wide adoption probably means you need at some point regulators or standard setting organization to intervene, to level the playing field, and to guarantee that you avoid a race to the bottom. Basically, that is one of the key challenges there. You can't expect one or two actors to uphold a good safety standards if others are not doing it right. Another challenge is that you need a functional audit ecosystem to be able to kind of guarantee the implementation, the actual take-up of those practices. That is currently nascent, I would say. And it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, right? Because the audit ecosystem needs something to audit against. So it needs a definition of a risk management framework, so that you need to kind of start somewhere. And then the third big challenge I kind of already mentioned is the missing building blocks. Like, we need to be really honest, like, this technology is moving really fast. And in terms of tools, equipment, we're not entirely there yet. One example I gave is how do we do extensive quantitative AI risk modeling? We have ideas and we're working on a research project, and I'm sure others are as well, but do we expertly know how to do it? I unfortunately don't believe it to be the case yet. Something else is like in the realm of assurance properties and guaranteed safe AI, which a lot of people are thinking is going to become necessary as capabilities keep improving, basically. And the truth is, this is a research agenda that is still in progress. And so one of the big challenges is keeping up, really, right? Because we're missing some of the tools still.
Thank you. Yes, we'll delve in a second into more policy level and what is required. But before that, perhaps something that can make it easier to adopt better practices in terms of risk management is to understand the risks through evaluations. So just to go back to Quentin, for as we move forward, there are potentially going to be mandatory evaluation requirements. How do you see scaling evaluation processes across thousands of models while maintaining a certain scientific rigor? What kind of infrastructure and coordination mechanisms would be necessary, especially at the international level?
Yeah. So I think that's the good thing about what we're doing is that it's quite automatic. So we can basically, like, you scale the compute, then you can scale the evaluation. But it's not that easy because the issue is also like having the right incentives for the evaluation to be able to grow. So for example, on our side, we still have very, very little incentive from VCs or from like we have some early clients, but it's still not very clear like how it's going to grow. And like the AI Safety Institute and these other things, other kind of institutes doesn't really like help us grow by like giving us fundings and this kind of stuff. So I think that the main issue with scaling is having more, like on our side, is having more fundings or more support from actually the people that need this evaluation, because it takes a lot of time to build those evaluation. It's been maybe 8 months that we're working on bets, and it's barely working right now, and we still need to like improving it. We need to test it. We need to improve the metric, because even if the tool works, we still need to validate the metric and improve it. And so there is a lot of research and development on this side. And so I would say that for scaling it, for making sure it's robust, making sure it's a good evaluation, we need more incentives to basically grow. So I think this is a main issue currently, is that there is not enough incentive. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe to build on this, Chloé, what kind of policies do you think, perhaps there's the funding aspect, which is not only a policy issue, but it can be a policy issue. What are the current policies that we have already in place that are encouraging industry leaders to implement better risk management practices? And what can be done, if this is not satisfactory to date?
Right. So in terms of existing policies, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is the EUA Act, probably. And as most of you would know, the EUA office is now overseeing the process of drafting a code of practice attached to the Act, which details a set of rules that industry can follow, and if they do, there is a presumption of conformity to the Act. So the current shape of that code of practice, I would say, so far is rather promising. It goes beyond capabilities evaluations. It contains several of the elements that are contained in the kind of ideal framework that I described earlier. Notably on risk governance, there's a few things. There's a few things on risk identification as well. There's a mention of open-ended red teaming, for example, the need to do risk modeling, the need to use multiple sources of evidence to assess risks. So those are all good things. On risk evaluation, we do have a concept of if-then statement. So if you have this type of result from an evaluation, that triggers that kind of mitigation. In the code of practice, there's the notion of risk tiers, which is somewhat similar to that. So in a nutshell, many of the elements, if not all, but many of the elements are there. So that's encouraging, and it's likely to go in the right direction. Obviously, this is still an ongoing process, so we still have to see what final form it will take. In its current form, I would say there's probably still room for kind of optimization. So another question is how and to what extent it will be applied. Again, having the presumption of conformity is probably a good thing, and I do hope that it will incentivize industry leaders to adopt it. Beyond the EUA Act, well, there was the Biden administration's first executive order, not the one from yesterday, but the one from earlier in the term. that contained requirements to notify the administration in case you were training a big model. Also, there was a requirement to state your safety policies, but it was not prescriptive in terms of what should be in the policies. So not necessarily super helpful or encouraging in that sense. And also it is likely, well, I guess the incoming Trump administration has announced they will revoke it. So can't really count on that. There's other things though, in addition to text that I was mentioning. So, some of the initiatives from the AI Safety Institute network, the UKAC, for example, has been trying to push the needle on risk management practices, risk assessment in particular. However, it doesn't have regulatory power, so it's mostly research. It hasn't really led to any concrete changes in industry leaders' practices, or at least we can't make the link that clearly. So, it's a mixed picture in terms of existing policies and whether or not they have the ability to change actual behaviors. There was a second part to your question, which was, what do you do if policies aren't kind of up to standards? It's a big question that I don't know that I have the answer to. But, I would say, I guess people in the community should keep supporting the development of better regulations. And I guess that's what we're trying to do. That's why we're involved in the code of practice process, and where we try to be involved wherever we can to try and push things in the right direction, in the direction of safe AI. Something else we can do is supporting better company policies, for example, by developing tools, by proposing readily adoptable policies, supporting industry standard setting processes, and then maybe we need to be a bit more creative in terms of the levers that we can activate. So one that is perhaps less activated so far is investors. And again, there's a parallel with climate change here and kind of, green investments, I guess. Some investors might be willing to invest primarily in safe AI, right? And so using a tool like our ratings, for example, and kind of showcasing the currently poor state of risk management practices and raising awareness among investors and customers might get them to kind of use their influence as stakeholders to change practices. Those are some of the ideas of what you can do while we wait for better policies.
Thank you so much for all these excellent points. In the spirit of steering things in the right direction, Agnès, maybe based on your observations from the field and the different perspectives that you gained evaluating the robustness and reliability of AI systems, but also other technologies, given Elena's expertise, does the existence of established standards in other fields like cybersecurity, for example, impact the performance of the systems being evaluated? And how can this serve as a lesson, perhaps as an incentive, to the standardization of AI evaluations?
I'm not so sure to what extent it impacts the performance itself, because when we measure performance, when we estimate the performance of the system, most of the time the big challenge is to try and understand what is the factor influencing this performance. So I would not be able to say that it's some standard, established standard, etc. I wouldn't really be able to do that. What I observe on the other side is that the existence of standards impacts the way the organizations tackle the topic of safety and reliability of their system and their practices. So I don't know if it affects performance. And plus, we would need some time as well. And we won't take this time just today, but just to say, well, to try and define what is performance. Is it functional performance or many different types of performance? So on this question, I would rather point to to everything that Chloé said about the impact of standards on companies and the way it helps them tackle the topic of overall performance in another way. And naturally, performance, well, it's naturally linked to safety, because a product that is underperforming, well, it increases the risk of, well, presenting bad behaviors. So this is the first thing. I mentioned already, but I will say it perhaps again, when I talked about the good examples in several communities. I mentioned the machinery directive, regulation now, European regulation, and the way they tackle safety. I think that we may learn a lot from their own expertise. So I'm not here talking exactly of established standards, because, well, the machinery community is still working as we are on, well, how to concretely tackle the problems of AI. So I'm not really talking about standards, but, well, here a regulatory framework at large. And I really appreciate the way they tackle safety, because it's quite rational, and that's for example, and it's not the only community, but this is the one I'm thinking of just right now, when they try and tackle the safety of a product in terms of mitigation. For example, they've got 3 different approaches. The one is, well, can we eliminate the risk? And if we can, we just eliminate the risk by design at the design phase. If we cannot, we just put safeguards. And if we cannot, then we just do a warning. I really like the approach. It's a bit symbolic for me, and it should be applied in the discussions around AI. Because there it means something that is quite doable by a company, by a small company. It's okay, I cannot eliminate it, so then I'm just going, for example, to warn the user. For example, this is what ChatGPT does when we want to use it. It says, I may make mistakes. On one side, we know, everyone here in the audience as well, we know that, okay, perhaps it's just not enough, because perhaps there may be some risks, catastrophic risks that we would like to be able to prevent from design. But at least I like to put forward in all the discussions the fact that let's remain really rational, realistic in the approach, because in the end it will impact industry. So it's always the idea of finding the good trade-off. And I saw several questions in the chat talking about catastrophes, etc. In all the discussions, naturally important to find the good trade-off between the real risks, what may really concretely happen. We can have scientific discussions about extreme risks and potential risks, but we need at some point to really be able to quantify to what extent they may happen, and to be really, this should be really fast, in my opinion. And it's not only my opinion, in fact, it's commonly shared across the community, to understand what are the real risks and to focus on those risks. Quentin mentioned the AI safety network, the network of AI safety institutes. I don't know to what extent everyone is aware of the creation of this network. I will perhaps, if someone wants, put the link in the chat for some information. I know that, so it's an international strategy where several different countries are at the level of their own government. There are establishing institutes that will be dedicated to safety. And what is strong with these activities that we are a network. So it means working together and trying to address the question of mutual recognition, of testing methods, etc. All the topics that were previously tackled by, I can't remember whom exactly, but well, it's been tackled by the speakers. So I think that, well, I know that in the discussions, we're pretty much aware of this importance. So sorry, Ines, I was going a bit far from the questions, but as we can see, it's opens up, in fact, something perhaps more specific in terms of, well, ensuring that at first we're talking about the right topic. So sorry, I was a bit large in my answer.
Not at all. Thank you so much. Thank you for your insights. I think there are recurring topics and points of agreement between the three of you today. And moving forward, I think maybe this notion of collaboration and having a common ground from which to go in building these standards, a ground that can be scientific, that can be operational with the right methodologies, requires this coordination effort between stakeholders. And my last question before we move on to the Q&A is going to be addressed to Chloé, because we've noticed this particularly that you mentioned, Agnès, the AC network, but also other, civil society and academic stakeholders have been working on AI evaluation initiatives from different angles. How do you think, Chloé, they should collaborate to have a greater impact on AI safety, maybe on policies? And why is it important that they become, that these evaluation methods become standardized in an international framework? We've touched a bit upon this, but maybe for the closing remark.
It's worth reiterating, I think. I think to your last point, that standardization is absolutely key to create an ambitious and safe level playing field, as I was saying earlier, and to avoid the race to the bottom. I think the worst outcome that we could see is if actors relying on the least robust evaluations or the risk management practices that are, well, again, the least developed, ended up attracting more customers because they have lower risk management costs or because they have less restrictive deployment safety measures. That would really be a terrible outcome. And so to avoid this, adopting a common standard seems to me the only way forward, to avoid what would be a very suboptimal outcome. Now, how do you make this happen? As you said, there are a variety of stakeholders implied in the process. And so, again, it's a big question. But I do think for effective collaboration between different stakeholders coming at a related topic, but from different angles, you need perhaps more transparency. And going back to Agnès' point earlier about methodology, you need a common vocabulary and common metrics, which seems to be largely missing still today. One example is related to benchmarks. Oftentimes benchmarks don't specify really well what it is exactly that they're trying to measure. That limits their interoperability and their ability to inform harm estimates, because we don't exactly know what we measure. And it also limits the ability for better collaboration and for a better division of labor between the various stakeholders engaged, right? If we had a clearer idea of who's doing what exactly, then we would be more efficient in collaborating, basically. It's very common sense, I guess, but we need to start there. And then how you do that? Well, to me, one of the most inspiring endeavors of the last few months is the one again mentioned by Agnès. We seem to agree, is the creation of the network of ICs. This seems to me like a very promising place to organize the collaborative division of labor. And I guess we particularly like the idea because it also has the advantage of developing government expertise, because those are at least public entities like linked to governments. And ultimately, we do think that AI safety shouldn't be the premise of only companies and industry, but we do need government workers and public institutions to understand it as well. So, there's hope, there's places where this could happen, and we know what the roadmap is. Like let's build common metrics and common vocabularies, and let's divide it up, I guess. Easier said than done, of course, but
thank you so much on this very hopeful note. I think we tackled a lot of key topics, key gaps, and also, as you mentioned, we know what the next steps are, so it's just about going forward. Thank you so much, Chloé. Thank you, Agnès and Quentin. We will move on to the Q&A. if you don't mind. So we have some questions from the audience. So unfortunately, due to time constraints, I won't be able to ask all of them, but select 3. The first one is addressed to Quentin, but also others, so whoever wants to reply. What do you think about the developments in mechanistic interpretability over 2024? Can you also explain what this is for us, and how do we distinguish safety washing from real safety evaluation work?
Yeah, it's quite a complicated question this late in the day, but I'm going to try to answer. So the way I see mechanistic interpretability is kind of the same way as I would look at neuroscience, for example, which is trying to break open the black box and trying to understand the mechanism that happens inside and what does it do to the behavior of the system at the end. I think one of my main critiques of this is that it's mainly doing the bottom-up approach with a lot of anthropomorphization, which is something I think is so the technology they are using is very interesting, but I think the way it is applied is a bit like it's used in a way that could be used better, basically. So what I think should happen is that we do more behavior studies. We use those behavior studies to then apply the tool that we know for doing mechanistic interpretability, but based on stuff we actually see in the field. One example, so someone mentioned ACEs. It's a sparse autoencoder. The idea is to say that we're going to take somewhere in the neural network and trying to make the neurons less how do you say, superposed. So basically, there is a lot of superposition in neurons. When a neuron activates, it's often activated for a lot of things. And so we would like to be able to distinguish different things from which these neurons activate. So we build autoencoders to try to disentangle the reason why those neurons activates and isolate actual like clear I don't know how to say it, but like basically it's trying to activate only on specific case and not on multiple cases. So like not for dog and grandma, but only for dog and only for grandma. So you have two different vectors. One of the issue I see with this is that so one thing that's happened later on was called representation engineering, which is trying to extract representation that happen inside the model to like, for example, maybe you saw on the on Anthropic blog post about the Golden Gate cloud, which is basically they found the representation of the Golden Gates and they just like pushed it at the extreme so that the model is always talking about the Golden Gates. So it was quite interesting. I think that's one issue I see with this is that we're doing a post. So we're looking at after the neuron have activated, we're looking at when does it activate. So we see that this neuron activates on, or like this representation activates on Golden Gate, but it doesn't mean that every representation of Golden Gates actually activate this neuron. So it's not a bidirectional evaluation. It's, you know that when this activates, you see Golden Bridge, but it doesn't mean that when Golden Bridge is here, it activates the neurons. And it's actually one of the reasons why you can still jailbreak what is called what is this? It's a circuit breaker. So circuit breaker is based on this technology. They've been trying to find the representation of harmful concepts, for example, a bomb. So the harmful concept, they watch it from the circuits of the model. And when they see this representation be activated, they stop the answer of the model and they say, now you can't stop, you can't talk anymore. And so if you want to bypass it, you just need to change the concept enough so that when the information passes through the network, it doesn't trigger this representation. So it's still possible to use the same word, but not trigger the internal representation. So I think they are still missing this, like, in context, there's missing the fact that they should also test their evaluation on mechanistic interpretability. But this is why, like, what I'm trying to do, which is more of a top to bottom approach. So starting from the behavior and then going down to how it works mechanistically. I think those two approaches are very complementary because there is an aspect of. So what I like to use as an example is the work that have been done on psychology and neuroscience. So the recent psychology, not the old psychology, which is basically an example. For example, is the work done by, what is her name? Elizabeth Loftus on the malleability of memory. So she worked on just behavior a study of how the memory can be edited and malleable, and she built a big framework on what are the big categories she observed when she edits the memory of a human. And 20 years later, people from neuroscience with a big MRI systems use this framework and just apply the framework on the what's happening in the brain. And because they had a clear framework of behavior and of a type of edition that's affects the behavior of the human, because they had this, they could really like distinguish between categories really easily, and they had like a very useful mechanistic interpretability of the brain, of the malleability of memory. And so I think we're missing this first mapping the behavior, and first like trying to really understand what is the phenomenon we're studying, and then applying tools from mechanistic interpretability to understand what's actually happening, instead of like saying, oh, I think that the model is doing this, or oh, I think that this is the reason why it behaves in this way, and then building an experiment that is often very anthropomorphizing, and then trying to understand what's happening in the like neurons of the network. And so yeah, I think it's promising because we have new tools that are interesting, but I think it's poorly used, and I'm disappointed in it, and I hope we are going to improve the way we use it soon.
Thank you very much for this improvised expose on mechanistic interpretability. So, no, thank you so much. I hope this answers the audience question. We have a technical audience tonight. So the next question is addressed to Agnès. Anthropic recently announced an ISO 42001 certification for responsible AI. What's your take on this announcement, and what do you think this entails for AI safety?
And thank you for sharing the information that I straightforward. Well, I shared it with my colleagues as well. So thanks for sharing it. So I have no idea what it entails for AI safety, because currently what we know of the ISO 42001 is that it covers one aspect only of what is required. And I'm sorry, I'm from France, so I'm thinking in the European way. So I'm thinking in terms of AI Act. And from the current discussion, well, we know what are the requirements in the AI Act, and we know that the requirement from the 42001 that comes from ISO level, they may fulfill only one part of the requirements of the AI Act. And this is why I was saying, sorry, because I'm European, I'm just thinking in terms of AI Act. We may consider that at some point the AI Act is going to cover all the requirements around safety. We do hope. So in my opinion, while it's really good, and it's a really good move from Anthropic to have used the most reliable, or the most mature standard that currently exists. So the 42001, it's really a good move from them to show that, okay, they have managed to obtain the certification. In my opinion, it doesn't, in my European opinion, it doesn't cover all the topics as well. It only covers the risk management system in the company, the AI, Sorry, it's late. It's not AI risk management. My God. Well, you've got the terms of the management system. Sorry, the AI management system. I don't know why I was putting risk in it. So it only covers this aspect of the company. It doesn't entail a proper evaluation of the product on certain types of risks, etc. It's in fact a separate topic. So it's a good move. It's a good first activity, but it must be linked as well to, I don't know, activities mentioned by Chloé in terms of doing and conducting proper risk assessments, but also doing performance assessments on the project, etc. That's my, like this is my first reaction. good thing, but not enough for safety.
Thank you, Agnès, for your European perspective. Now, the last question from the Q&A part is addressed to Chloé. What should be the role of third-party auditors and civil society organizations in encouraging building international AI evaluation standards? And what are the next steps we should take? So I think because we touched upon this question a little bit throughout the discussion, maybe the focus should be on third-party auditors and civil society actors. And have maybe more concrete steps that we can summarize.
Right. So third-party auditors, as I explained, are definitely a key element if we're going to be able to upgrade the general standard here. I do think it's a difficult question because, as I explained repeatedly, there's not much that third-party auditors can do without first an agreement on what it is that they audit against, right? So like, yes, they should keep on researching on the topic and proposing their own auditing framework. They should keep on building tools. They should keep on improving evaluation methods. They should collaboratively work together to structure themselves and perhaps get at a consensual answer amongst civil society, organization actors, etc. But ultimately, first of all, for any of this to get a stronger traction and kind of legitimacy, I do believe this at some point needs to come from a regulating authority, kind of setting a line in the sand there. And again, and also to ensure wider adoption as well. So for that, it does make it difficult to say very clearly what the next steps are. I think it's very important that CSOs engage as much as they can with regulators, with existing processes as much as they can. Whether that's at the EU level, whether that's with the AI safety network, whether that's NIST. Like I think we don't have the luxury of overlooking any opportunity to engage. I do think having this kind of discussion and it's very reassuring that there's a lot of common themes and we agree on a lot of things and talking amongst ourselves and maybe we were talking before about the division of labor. This is a big issue. Like there's much that needs to be done, and so better coordination amongst civil society organizations to make sure that we don't do the same work twice and that we actually are complementary is definitely something that we can advance on while waiting for regulators to give clearer guidance, I guess. But ultimately, I do think we're gonna need that in the end. Hope that makes sense.
Ines,
yes.
Ines, I would like to add something that I couldn't find how to raise my hand. May I?
Yes, of course, please.
Chloé was talking about legitimacy in producing standards that could be recognized internationally. If I'm not mistaken, Chloé, perhaps I understood what you said the way I wanted it, because it made me think of discussions currently at the level of the AZ network, but in some other intergovernmental and international organizations and associations. The problem here is that, okay, it's good, as Chloé said, that many people and many different types of stakeholders tackle the topic, but in the end, we're talking about regulatory compliance and ensuring that we can put a product on the market. So it's not any type of organization and association that can have the legitimacy to produce such things. So I know that at the AZ level, for example, it's part of the debate of, the AZ network, as I said, they are, supported by the governments of each country, strongly supported, and sometimes it's part of the governments themselves. So the market surveillance authorities are not far behind, but do they have the skill, the knowledge the expertise, the legitimacy to produce standards that will be recognized. So when I used the word of mutual recognition before, and it's really a formal term, in fact, ensuring that in one country, the testing results and the evaluation, the output of the evaluation is recognized by one country and by the other countries, etc. It's something normally that follows a kind of a strict process. I would like to share one thing, and I'm not saying that it's the only answer to that, but for example, at that level, at the IECEE level, so it's a standardization commission that is used to producing mutual recognition standards across different countries. They have started work on the topic of AI. In my opinion, it's really worth following their work, even if it's at the very, very, very beginning currently. But I think that it's good that we have all these discussions in all the international and intergovernmental organizations. But at some point, I think it will be perhaps another entity that will concretely establish the mutual recognition standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agnès, and thank you, Chloé, for all these insights. There's a lot of food for thought here. Yeah, so I won't delve deeper into this topic, although we could spend hours discussing it because we're running out of time, unfortunately. I will just ask one closing question to each of you, and I will ask you to reply in 1 minute. So as we approach the AI Summit, where there's going to be a lot of multi-stakeholder and international discussions, if you had the undivided attention of the stakeholders to talk about AI evaluation standards for 1 minute, what would be the main message you wanted to send? How could we take what we've been talking about here for the past hour and derive the key message that we'd like to send to the stakeholders of the AI Summit? Agnès, maybe you can start.
Yes. So the first thing, the AI Action Summit is coming, so we are all tired, I guess. Yes, okay. The key message I would like to be heard is the fact that we must find the perfect trade-off between what can be what is auditable. So the third party, what can be the real concrete checkpoints. So a good trade-off, sorry, my sentence was complicated. The perfect trade-off between auditability and what the companies can really implement in their products. So something, as I said, that is realistic for them, that is not a burden for them, a burden of proof that would be too intensive and would ruin smaller companies, etc. So perfect trade-off between obligations, requirements, in fact, obligations for the companies, and the auditability of the checkpoints, in fact. I hope it was clear. A bit fuzzy, yes. But I hope I will prepare it in view of the summit, okay?
It was very clear. Thank you so much. And it joins what we were discussing earlier. So thank you. And now maybe Quentin, in 1 minute, what's the message you'd like to send?
So just not to repeat what Agnès said, because I kind of agree with what she said, I'm going to do the other side, which is I think it's important I'm going to repeat myself. Remember that these are a complex system, that we need to have a dynamic approach, that we need to be anomaly driven. I really like this term, which is like we should be driven by the stuff we don't understand and not by the stuff we understand. So keep exploring, keep having startups throw our theories and keep improving our theories. And so like just be in the field more often and not anthropomorphizing these systems.
Thank you so much. Counterintuitive thing to do, but very important. Thank you. So Chloé, in 1 minute, what's your message?
I think my message in 1 minute would be, yes, AI is a very complex technology, very often a black box, But again, AI risk management doesn't have to be. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. AI is a technology that changes fast, and AI risk changes fast. Well, that's also the case in the financial industry, and there are lessons to be leveraged there. AI is very broad and encompasses very different types of risks. That's also the case in enterprise risk management. We can learn from cybersecurity about risk that is characterized by the presence of an adversary. We can learn from environmental risk about risk that spans beyond an organization and characterize society. So my main point would be, we're not completely clueless. There are things we can do. However, it is changing fast, and we need to have those in place before some of those risks manifest. And so, let's look at what is done in other places. It's not going to kill innovation. We haven't stopped building planes or nuclear centrals or power plants, we're still innovating when it comes to drugs or many of those industries that are regulated. So we can do it again, but we need to do it fast to strike the right balance between reaping the benefits of AI and avoiding the harms.
Thank you so much. Thank you, three of you, for all these insights. Thank you for making the time to be here to share all your valuable perspectives into this topic. And thank you to all those who participated. Thank you for your questions. This will be the closing words. So don't forget that the Turing Dialogues on AI Governance is a series of roundtables. This was the first event. There will be others, so stay tuned. And again, I think that we have a lot of insights to share ahead of the summit on these very, very important topics. So thanks again.